Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike shop. Welcome to Story Time with Chris James. I just know one of these days I'm going to give it the wrong name, but, well, so far I think I've managed to keep it straight. I will now pick up right where I left off with the last episode. After a few minutes, the door opened once more, and one of the scientists stuck their head through. Oh, there you are. We thought you had followed us. Come, we need your talent right away. He ushered Pam into the next room that looked an awful lot like a laboratory. The scientists had all drawn their lab coats, and some had acquired clipboards with forms and charts on them. They all looked at Pam. Okay, what do you... Pam started. Wait, shouldn't she have some protection? Yes, that might be a good idea. One of the scientists walked to the corner and grabbed the house phone. He mumbled into the handset for a bit, casting glances at Pam every so often. Then he hung up and announced, "They're on the way. It shouldn't be but a minute." This led to everyone standing around looking bored and lost as to what to do. Pam took the time to look around the room to try to discern what it was they were doing in this top secret scientific laboratory buried far beneath the earth. She came to no conclusions at all. There was a knock at the door, followed by a couple of men dressed in coveralls who entered and presented themselves to the guy that acted like he was in charge. This particular scientist talked to the coveralled men and then pointed to Pam. She needs some protection before we can get in with this next objective. The guys in the coverall converged on Pam. One held out a lab coat and helped get it on. The other took some safety goggles from his pocket and offered them to Pam. This done, the coverall gang left, returning to some more or less important occupation. Right, now we can begin. This came from the lead scientist, or at least Pam thought he might be the head guy. He looked older than the others, and his hair was more of a mess, kind of like Giorgio Tsoukalos, but not nearly as good looking or young. Shall we show her the box? Pam could have sworn she heard dramatic music playing in the background. The scientists all gathered around a large wooden box. It was about 3 feet on a side and braced to withstand some very rough handling. There were a copious amount of screws driven in from every side. The scientists gathered around and then grew quiet. They all stared at the box, and then they stared at Pam, as if she had some answer to some question no one had bothered to ask yet. Would you please tell us the condition of the beast inside the box? Mr. Grayhair asked. Pam looked at him and then stared at the box. What kind of beast are we talking about here? She grew concerned there might be some dangerous creature secured inside that just might be trying to escape and do damage to anyone unfortunate enough to be standing within reach of its excited exit. She backed up a few steps. One of the female scientists answered, "It's a cat," as if Pam should have known this already. A cat? In a box? Pam looked around at the concentration showing on everyone's face. Yes, of course, you know, Schrodinger's cat. We have to know, is it alive or not? Pam looked at the box. Well, that would depend on when was the last time you fed him. Some of the scientists made notes on their clipboards. Others spoke quietly into recorders. Pam just made out one saying, "When was the cat fed?" No. Schrodinger's cat is an experiment we've been conducting for some time now, and we must know, is the cat alive or dead? Pam looked at the hair guy. Let's just pretend for a second that I don't know what the heck you're talking about. Could you fill in one or two blank spots? Let's say there's a cat that may be simultaneously both alive and dead, a state known as a quantum superposition as a result of being linked to a random subatomic event that may or may not occur. The hair guy said. So what we need from you, using your superpowers, can you tell us, is the cat alive or dead? Without thinking, Pam walked over to the box and thumped it with her hand. Meow, came from inside. I would say, based on my powers of observation, the cat is alive. No. You must use your sixth sense to perceive whether the cat is alive right now, right this second. It was alive a second ago. Pam was having a hard time with this thought experiment. As she put on a psychic working hard face. Then, for good measures, she pointed her index fingers at the box. The cat is alive. Several scientists were busy writing down what was bouncing around inside their heads. An argument broke out by the back wall. One scientist threw his clipboard down and stormed from the room. After much discussion, the hair owner approached Pam. We must thank you for putting paid to this experiment. Now that we know, we can get on with our next test. He slapped Pam on the back as if she were an old colleague. She just about fell over. Come on to the next exploration. The scientists all began to file out through the back door, en route to some other part of this secret underground complex. Once more, Pam found herself alone. She even tried to follow the gang out this other door, but the last man held up one hand just before closing the door with a loud click. He had locked the door. Pam was about to return to the meeting room, but first she looked at the box. There was a lid held in place by a set of hasps. Undoing the locks, Pam threw the lid open, expecting the cat to be upset about being experimented on. The cat just looked at her and then went on washing one paw. Looking into the box, Pam could see no evidence of any kind of a random subatomic anything. As she went back to the meeting room and took a seat. Shortly, Mr. Smith came in and gave her a look. Congratulations, you brought their experiment to a timely conclusion. Shall we go? He held the door open. They had to pass the security guys once more. Taking their jobs seriously, the guards inspected all IDs once more in case Pam or Mr. Smith had somehow snuck in and now were trying to just walk out with some top-secret device hidden in their clothing. Pam was glad to be on her way back to the surface. Walking along the corridor, she didn't know if she should say anything about what she had been called on to do. Mr. Smith answered her uncertainty. Whatever those eggheads were working on, it had the whole place in a standstill. The government owes you a debt of gratitude. He pressed the elevator call button. Pam bit her lip, figuratively. If you've ever actually bit your tongue or your lip, you know you don't want to do it on purpose. The guards at the top side were equally as diligent as their cohorts below. The air was fresh and clear outside. Pam felt as if she'd been underground for ages, or at least a few hours. The sun had gone down and the night was in full swing. The air had just a bit of a chill to it. Pam was about to call her mom and tell her that she was running late again. And then she remembered her folks were in Dallas for the next 4 days. She was free to get home as late as she usually did. The drive back to the city went without excitement. Pam watched as the lights came into view, and then she looked at the buildings around the Federal Building. As night came on, the armies of the road came out in force. There was a man standing on the street corner yelling at the top of his lungs about how the end was near. Just down from him was a woman pushing a shopping cart filled with purses. She couldn't possibly need that many. She had twice as many as Pam and her mother combined. Some half-naked guy went running by, yelling and screaming, and the wrong half of him was naked. Pulling up next to Pam's car, Mr. Smith reached into his suit coat pocket and extracted a large envelope. Remember, you've signed a non-disclosure agreement. If you run your mouth, you'll find yourself in more hot water than you could float a battleship in. He handed the envelope across to Pam. We'll be in touch. He turned back to the windshield as a way of telling Pam she was dismissed. Pam got out, closed the door, and the government car pulled away and headed to parts unknown. The wind picked up, and it was noticeably colder than at the government facility. Pam missed her jacket, which was still hanging over the back of her chair at work. Well, I guess I'm through for the night. She opened her car, clomb in. The heater was getting a lot of work for July. Pulling into the curb in front of her home, Pam was still surprised to not see her dad's pickup in the driveway. I hope they're having fun. How much fun could there be at a business convention? The house was cold when she entered. Cold enough to warrant turning on the heater here, too. But she didn't. It was just too... not in the middle of July. This is just plain... Pam set her purse down on the counter. The envelope was sticking up, so she grabbed it, wondering what kind of remuneration the government was willing to hand out for her so-called services. As she opened the envelope and pulled out a handful of bills. There were 25 bills in her hand. She checked the denomination. Each one was a brand new $100 bill. Holy cow, they paid me $2,500 for that? No wonder the economy is screwed up. As she considered ordering a pizza to celebrate, but then she thought, God, I need to give this to Uncle Ray. After all, it was company, and I was on the clock. She stuffed the cash back into her purse, and then she hid her purse under her bed in case someone broke in and tried to steal it. Pam opened the refrigerator to see what was there for dinner. Chapter 5. The Ghost Investigation. The room was freezing cold when Pam stuck one foot out from under the covers in an attempt to wake up and get ready for work. Holy cow, this is just plain... She didn't want to say weird anymore. Wrapping the blanket around her pajamas, Pam stepped onto the floor with one bare naked foot. Oh, it's freezing! She hopped across the room to her sock drawer. Grabbing a rolled-up set, she jumped back onto the mattress that was already growing cold and uninviting. The closet wasn't any better. Pam dressed for what she hoped would be a warmer day, but she pulled her boots on and took her shoes along for later. Her best jacket was still at work, so she grabbed her next better one, the one with too many zippers and snaps. It looked as if it had been manufactured by someone wanting to use up his leftover fasteners. Pulling into the office, the air was not so chilly here. In fact, it was downright warm. Not mid-July warm, which in Texas means hot, but in the rest of the world they would say it was Africa hot. But around here it was Texas hot. Climbing the steps to the wide front porch, Pam could see a few people waiting to be seen by whoever they were waiting to be seen by. The front door never closed completely, and she could see right into the waiting area through the gap. Entering, she got busy sending people to the appropriate staff members. Cassandra stopped by Pam's desk. Morning, hun. I see you're dressed for this weather we're having. She pointed to the scarf and the gloves. Cassandra was the best energy healer in the entire whatever you would use to measure the ground around her. She had a propensity to dress in all blue outfits, which led Pam to refer to her as a blue healer on more than one occasion. She was also as wide as she was tall, which she was under 5 feet. I've never seen it this chilly in July. What do you think is causing it? Pam ran her hands up and down her arms to show the chill was still with her. No idea. The weather folks said it was supposed to be in the 90s all day. Cassandra led her next patient back to her room, which was the only office on the ground floor. She had earned the place of distinction. Pam would have called her Uncle Ray to tell him about the large sum of money she had that by all rights belonged to him, but she didn't have his phone number, and nobody else did either. If Ray Bogus wanted to call, you had everyone's number, but no one ever really wanted to speak to him. It was probably due to his way of talking around the subject at hand without ever getting to the point. For safekeeping, Pam shoved the cash into the book she had driven to San Antonio to pick up. The bills made an inviting bulge in the oversized manuscript, as if something of interest were secreted in the volume. Pam saw a note sitting in the inbox where she noticed her name on it. Pulling the small post-it from the wooden box, Pam saw a note to herself. Don't forget the stuff at Miss Daruka's house. She had forgotten. The only person waiting in the waiting area was waiting for Carol Munchausen, the pet psychic, who was currently working out of room 2A. She'd been in the kitchen for a long time until Pam was able to get a door unstuck. She had sent Grandy up to see about the door, but when he ran into difficulties, Pam went to give him a hand. She grabbed the doorknob and, quite by accident, unmessed up whatever was keeping the door shut. Pam had found there were several rooms not in use because either they were so full of junk no one could enter without running the risk of becoming trapped by all the detritus, or they had been destroyed by one of Mr. Armstrong's visitors. Pam was doing her best to reconcile this problem. A crew was in the process of replacing the windows blown out from room 3B right now. They had to replace the wall that held the window in place since the explosion had left a hole 8 feet across. Just as soon as they were finished, they would see about the floor in room 3D, which also had a missing window, compliments of Demon Bob. Telling Eddie she'd be right back, Pam went out to her car. The weather was nice for a change, just about 80 degrees, so she had slipped her shoes on, leaving her boots under her desk. Her jacket had joined her other jacket placed over the back of her chair. This shouldn't take but a few minutes. She drove away from the office en route to see what had been caught on the ghost gear. Driving across town, she listened to the radio, glad to hear something other than hard rock, which still snuck into her mind any time it was quiet. Pam hoped the song wouldn't become a part of her daily routine. As she grew close to her destination, it grew colder and colder. Soon the heater was on, trying to drive the cold from the vehicle, and the windshield began to fog up. And there's Kathy. Stopping at the curb, Pam looked at the house and wondered if she should come back later. It looked kind of chilly out there, and Pam had dressed for summertime. Well, it is summertime. This weather is just... Pam wondered what word she could use other than weird. Peculiar. This weather is just peculiar. Nah, that didn't sound right. Stepping from her nice warm car, Pam ran across the sidewalk and up onto the porch. She was already opening the front door when she wondered, what if Miss Daruka is home? She might be doing something I don't need to see. Pam let her mind run wild. What if she killed somebody and I walk in on her destroying the evidence? Yep, she went straight to the worst thing possible. The cold wind blew across the porch as Pam rang the doorbell. When she didn't hear anything like a doorbell being rung, she tried knocking. After way too many seconds of shivering and rubbing her arms, trying to create enough warmth to drive frostbite away, the door swung open again. "Ah, Pamela, I'm glad to see you. Come in out of the cold." Sharma held the door open as Pam practically stormed through the opening. "I came by to pick up the equipment so I can run a review and see what we might have caught." Pam was just glad to be in out of the wind. "Would you care for some tea?" As Sharma led the way back to the kitchen, it seemed to be her favorite part of the house. The stove was going, which made the kitchen nice and warm compared to the rest of the house. "I still don't have any electricity. I wonder if this storm has done something to my lines." They sat and discussed the uncanny weather, drinking hot tea and putting off having to leave the nice warm kitchen. "You should have brought a jacket or a coat." Sharma looked at Pam's lightweight dress and shoes. It was warm at the office. Pam thought about her stack of jackets on her chair. They ran out of weather-related things to discuss, and then the subject of the power company inability to fix whatever was wrong with the lights ran dry. Miss Daruka threw Pam a curveball. "Why are you running around looking into haunted houses? A young girl like you should be having fun, going shopping, chasing boys." I needed to get a job because I didn't need to. It's just that I kind of like this stuff." Pam ran down like a wind-up toy coming to the end of its spring. "All work, no play will make you unhappy." The woman gave Pam a stern look. When there was nothing else to discuss, Pam began to assemble her gear, piling it all by the front door. She hoped to make one quick dash to her car and get out of the cold wind as quickly as she could. "I'll let you know if anything turns up as we're reviewing the tapes and the recordings. I'll give you a call soon." And with that, Pam grabbed the cases, one in each hand, and ran for her car, in high heels, which is hard enough without a dress on that billows up, making walking nearly impossible, let alone running. The case didn't fit in the trunk. She had to stuff everything around. The longer she worked at getting things in the trunk, the colder she felt. After several tries, she got the cases stowed in the trunk, and then it was her turn. Well, that wasn't so hard. Yeah, right. Pam started her vehicle and headed for, well, not the office. Strange things happened to electronic devices that chanced passing through the portals of the bag building. She took the cases to her house. It would be a safe location to review the evidence, and she could get some warmer clothes on. Parking in her dad's spot in the driveway, he wasn't going to need it for a few more days. Pam was closer to the door and therefore less time in the wind. She jumped out and opened the trunk. The cases had shifted and they wouldn't come out. She tried lifting and pulling, and when that didn't work, she pushed on one case as she pulled on another. Her legs were getting cold and her toes were growing numb. Her stupid dress kept flying up, making her feel a bit like she was mooning the neighbors. As she could do nothing with one hand holding her dignity in place, so she let the dress do what it would do. Getting both hands under the edge of one case, Pam tried to force it up and out of the trunk. Nothing seemed to work. Giving up, Pam ran for the front door. By now, her fingers were stiff and they didn't work when she tried to get the key into the lock. "Oh, this is just stupid." She tried blowing warm breath on her chilled fingers. The lock finally turned and the door swung open. Stumbling through, she pushed the door closed to keep some of the nastiness out. The house wasn't all that much warmer. Pam walked to the thermostat and turned the heat on. The air came on and blew funky-smelling ick throughout the building, but it felt warmer, so Pam just went to see about better coverings. One time last year, her folks had taken Pam to see the Grand Canyon. It had been the first part of January, and everything had been covered with ice, but the view had been spectacular. Even with snow and ice everywhere, Pam had been thrilled by the trip, as she had bought some long underthingies and still had them someplace. She opened her dresser and started to dig, and couldn't remember where she had stashed the winter things, since it seldom got that cold anywhere around here. After looking in every drawer, she gave up. I'll just grab my other boots from the closet. She went to search for some footwear that wouldn't expose her toes to the frosty wind. She pulled the closet door open and began to dig, pulling out some libraries that were supposed to have gone back to the school library last April. Oops, she set them to the side to be dealt with later. Reaching way back into the dark recesses of the closet, Pam pulled a set of long underwear from the back. Okay, so that's where they went. She considered looking in her makeup counter for her boots. Nothing is everywhere it's supposed to be. Pulling on some jeans, Pam sat on the bed to keep from falling onto her backside. As she sat there, she spotted her hiking boots sticking out from under her dresser. I know I didn't put those there. Pam pulled on her winter coat and some gloves before venturing back out to see about the ghost gear. Now that she was warm, the cases came out with any struggle. This is just so odd. It still didn't sound right. As she set the black plastic cases in the living room, no one was going to object, as she'd see what she could see later. Pam got back to the office and found it was in the 80s, and she was dressed for a winter storm. She began to sweat as soon as she walked into the office. Ugh! Pam draped her coat over her jacket that was over her other jacket and that was over her chair. She went to the bathroom to get the long underwear off before she died from heat prostration. Pam looked at Prince Wapo as he slept on her chair. He was doing his best to ignore her as she tried to get him to leave and go sleep elsewhere. Come on, get your own chair. She tried bribery. I'll get you a tuna sandwich from the coffee shop. The prince looked at her as if to say, that sandwich has been on display for over a month. Pam went to drag a chair over from the wall, and just as she got near, the prince got up and went to look for something to eat. Gee, thanks. She tucked into her chair in case he changed his mind. Now, sitting in her chair, Pam saw someone was sitting in the waiting area. Can I help you? She ladled on the charm. At first glance, the person looked like a teenage girl. Her hair was styled into two pigtails sticking out from her head. She had on a white button-down top over a short tartan skirt. Knee socks extended up from a pair of old-style saddle shoes. At first. Looking closer, Pam saw an older woman, maybe in her 30s, who was trying to look young. Images of Mrs. Bellum, the psychic vampire, came to mind. The teenage woman looked at Pam and then answered, Oh, no, I'm waiting for my mom. She's seeing someone. Pam felt a need for some coffee, so she headed in to see about satisfying her inner teen. Her real teen, as opposed to the fake teen waiting in the waiting room. There were several staff members gathered around the coffee bar, all looking at some new object of interest set inside a glass display. Eddie slid Pam's usual over. Did you see what Grandy found in the storage building? He pointed a finger in the direction of the display. The glass display was an antique glass bell-shaped cover set atop a raised base. The top was about 16 inches high and 10 inches across. Inside, she saw the remains of some bizarre creature that had been lurking in the storage shed. It took Pam a few seconds to recognize this thing of interest. It was a greenish-yellow cast of the inside of her head. Grandy had found her cheese woo's sinus mess. It brought back memories of pain she experienced as she pulled it from her nose. Pam considered telling them what it actually was, but Madame Dingus was holding a hand on each side of the cheese thing with her eyes closed, as she was trying to channel the creature. I feel intense pain, as if someone had their soul ripped from their head. I think this poor creature was killed by some hideous monster. She was trembling with the effort of pulling this information from thin air. Madame Dingus was not a stellar psychic. The only people in the room not amazed by Madame Dingus's oration was Pam and Wanda Murkowski, who was still thinking hard about something somebody had forgotten to write down. Pam decided to keep her mouth shut as far as the Cheese Woos creature was. Mr. Techno, I need some help, but later tonight. What do you have going? He was having a hard time tearing his gaze away from the cheese thing. Carol Munchausen gave the thing a passing glance, but then she too felt something. I feel a lot of pain as well. Perhaps it came from another planet. I have the cameras and the recorders from Miss Daruka's house, and I need some help going over the evidence. You didn't bring them in here, I hope. Everybody knew any electronic device entering the bag office was no longer a reliable source of information. Oh no, I dropped everything off at my house. I just thought it would be nice to get together and review the videos and maybe order some pizza. How many hours of evidence do you have? Eddie only looked at Pam for a second to be polite. 12 hours of tape, 36 hours of audio, 3,605 photographs. She'd checked the memory cards on the still cameras. Yikes. I have the kids tonight. Patty's going out with the girls from work. Let's see who all can help out. Eddie stepped up behind the glass bell, which was where all eyes were focused. Who all is up for evidence review and pizza tonight? Several hands went up. Carol and Cassandra both were more than happy to help out. Grandy said he'd show up, but it was mostly for the free pizza. Manuel decided he could give him a few hours of his time, and Hilda Nesmerusticus, who had just walked in and didn't know what was going on, held up her hand, not wanting to be left out of something exciting. She started to fall over, but caught herself on the bar. Pam was pleased with the response. How about we start at 6 tonight at my place? She gave them her address. Oh, you might want to bring a coat. It's kind of cold around my place. This elicited a few odd looks from the assembled crowd, but just about everyone was familiar with odd around this place. When Pam got back to her desk, the 30-something teen had left. The gang had set up in the living room. They had all brought their own computers, so there would be plenty of eyes on anything of interest. Cable snuck out the back of the TV like an alien octopus. Manuel had hooked the video camera up to the TV in the corner. It wasn't a new model, but it was big and it worked. Al Bogus refused to buy a new TV because this one worked, and he kept saying, "Act your wage," which was something he'd learned at the Dave something class he had taken. Ever since Pam's folks had attended something called Financial Peace University, Pam's life had taken a turn for the difficult. All the credit cards in the house had been sacrificed to something called plastic surgery in the kitchen, which involved a pair of scissors and a trash can. Her folks refused to get a loan for anything, which had led to Pam driving an old beat-up 1980 Chevy Malibu. It had all led to Pam getting a job working for Uncle Ray. Now, after just a month, Pam had found she really liked the people she worked with. As she was saving up to buy a new, used car, and as she was seeing things and hearing things she never dreamed existed. The doorbell rang, so Pam went to answer it. It was Sarah, from down the street. Pam had called her to come by since the tween was very much into paranormal stuff, and everybody knew her from the time the demon Waldo had tried to eat them both in the old rock quarry just south of town. Stepping through the door, Sarah looked more like a Inuit hunter than a young girl. Man, this is just crazy. You think it might snow? The tween peeled off the winter coat, followed by a jacket, followed by a sweater. She had dressed for the long trek from 2 doors down. The Bag Gang were all busy welcoming Sarah when the pizza guy arrived. Pam opened the door to find a very cold, very large man holding a stack of pizza boxes. I hope they're still hot. I didn't think I'd be delivering in the Ice Age. He stood there shivering while Pam handed him some cash. She gave him a good tip to make up for the frostbite. His short pants and Hawaiian shirt did nothing to keep the cold wind from beating the heck out of him. The gang settled into the task at hand. Watching the TV showing the entryway to Mrs. DeRuca's house, the action was palatable. The hallway going to the kitchen just sat there, being a hallway. Sarah, being new to paranormal investigations, had to ask, why not just fast forward to the good parts? Too much risk of missing something important. You never know what tiny bit of evidence you could miss by not watching every minute of the tape. Manuel was in charge of working the video camera, and Cassandra had a notepad to keep track of any anomalies in need of further scrutiny. Anytime someone spotted anything that could be deemed not of this earth, the tape was stopped, rewound, scrutinized further, and the time was noted so the tape could be looked at closer at a later time. There, what's that? All eyes were on what turned out to be a bug flying by the camera. There's something by the back door. It turned out to be a tree outside the kitchen window. Then they all saw them at the same time. The TV screen showed the hallway that led to the kitchen. The front door was to the left of the camera, and as they watched, the light on the floor suddenly became very bright. The front door had opened all by itself. All eyes watched as spectral images appeared from the left side of the screen. It moved past the camera, turned around, and then 2 more images appeared beside it. The gathered investigators were as quiet as a sleeping cat. From the TV, sound was heard. This is the place I told you about. Isn't it nice? It needs some work, but the structure is good. The 3 images walked away from the camera. That looked like Corinne Dingwhopper. You know the ghost? No, she's a realtor, and she sold us our house. Manuel was standing by to freeze the frame. The ghost is a real estate person? No. She's a realtor, and she's very much alive. Those people must have come by to look the place over. Is Miss DeRuca selling her house? Manuel asked. The assembled psychics and near-psychics and non-psychics all watched as the 3 people walked through the house looking at anything of interest. They all look alive to me. After about 30 minutes of inaction, non-action, the 3 left the house by way of the left side of the camera. Okay, so we now know the house is being visited by potential buyers. Let's keep going and see if we spot whatever is haunting the place. Cassandra grabbed another slice of pizza. The phone rang and Grandy was the closest, so he picked it up. Howdy, what's up? Paula Bogus held the phone out in front of her, trying to see who had answered the phone. Is Pam there? This is her mother. Grandy held the phone handset out to the room. Pam, it's your mom. Pam came over and grabbed the phone. Hi, Mom. How's it going? Pam, dear, you're not having a party, are you? Oh, no. I invited a bunch of guys from work over. We're looking at evidence from the latest ghost hunt. Pam didn't feel it was necessary to tell her mom she had been the only ghost hunter involved in the investigation. Oh, I was just calling to see if you needed anything. Paula wasn't sure if it was a good thing to now have her one and only at home with a bunch of weirdos from work. They did the usual mom-daughter chat. Did you get something to eat? Paula was worried about her kid. Yeah, we ordered some pizza and we're watching videos trying to see what's haunting some woman's house. Well, enjoy yourself. After hanging up, Paula was torn between concern her daughter was working way too hard and happy she had found some new friends, even if they were a bunch of weirdos. She turned to her husband. Do you think the people who work for your brother are kind of odd? Al looked up from his magazine. No more so than Pamela being able to see ghosts. Do you think that's healthy? As long as she doesn't bring any of them to the house, we're okay. I don't think anything bad could happen. Pam was trying to pay attention to the screen, but she had seen more action while watching her sock drawer. As she saw Sharma come down the stairs and walk towards the kitchen. As she passed the camera, she smiled and waved at the camera. Pam, without thinking, as she was prone to always do, on more than one occasion, she waved back. Sarah looked at her and asked, "What are you doing? You see something?" Yes, I just saw Miss Daruka." All eyes turned to Pam. "You saw someone on the screen?" Cassandra asked. "Yes, it was Miss Daruka, the owner of the house." "Run the tape back." The Manny was already doing so. When Pam saw Sharma in the middle of the screen, but walking backwards up the stairs, she said, "Stop right there, see her?" "There's no one on the set." Hilda was sitting on the floor. She'd taken a tumble earlier and found it easier to just stay there. She would reach up and grab a piece of pizza every once in a while, but never getting farther than her knees. Manuel, who was a psychic, looked long and hard at the TV. "I see an image, but it's so faint." He tried moving around the set to look from several angles. Carol, the pet psychic, tried to see what Pam was looking at, but her talent ended when fur was no longer part of the situation. Grandy had seen Sharma, but thought she was just somebody in the house. He was busy stuffing pizza in his mouth and not really watching anyway. "Okay, we found out who's doing the haunting." Cassandra was the agreed on senior member of the group. "It looks as if Sharma is a ghost." "But she's the one that hired us." Pam had dealt with plenty of ghosts lately, from Civil War soldiers to a Vietnam vet in need of a fresh can of beer, but this was a first. "Well, it looks like the client is dead." Sarah was confused. "If the client is a ghost and you caught her on tape, why can't I see her?" This got everyone to thinking. And finally, Cassandra tried. "Grab one of the still cameras and check the timestamp. Now see if you can find a photo of Sharma." Pam went to the dining room table and searched through several hundred photos till she spotted one with Miss Daruka in it. "There, see her?" Sarah looked at the photo. "I see a swirly mass in the middle of the photo." Grandy looked at the image. "Hey, she looks pretty good to me." He thought about that statement. "I mean, she looks healthy." He kind of thought some more and said, "She doesn't look dead." Most of the bag staff saw just a shadowy form, but no one could say it was indeed the customer in question. Cassandra slapped Pam on the back and said, "It looks like you're our best psychic when it comes to ghosts. But I'm just the..." Pam had to admit she was the go-to person when dealing with spirits. The pizza party kind of slowed down to a crawl. "Hey, everybody, look outside. It's snowing." Hilda was kneeling by the coffee table munching on pizza when she noticed white stuff falling from above. Everyone ran to the patio window. "Wow," and "Wow," and somebody said, "Holy cow," and I think that was Sarah. They all stepped outside to watch the lawn turn into a winter wonderland. After watching for a bit, they all ran back in really fast to grab their coats, hats, gloves, and stuff. Carol began to build a snowman while Manuel threw snowballs at everyone. Hilda tried to throw one back and wound up falling into the snowdrift, and she vanished under the white stuff. It didn't take long till somebody asked, "Is this real? Isn't this the middle of July?" Cassandra said, "I think I'd best get going. The way things are looking, we might all get snowed in." The party came to an abrupt end. Manuel left early. His wife needed him to pick something up on his way home. Carol took Grandy out to her car. Grandy didn't drive because the sight of dead people littering the streets made it impossible to drive with his eyes shut. He did take one of the remaining pizza boxes so he'd have breakfast and lunch for tomorrow. The inside of Carol's car was filled with pet hair. Hilda was about to walk out to her car. "I'll see you in the morning then," and she started to slide on the icy sidewalk. Pam grabbed her arm and held her up. "I'll just walk you out to your car." She had to keep the young healer from becoming a snowman or woman in the middle of the sidewalk. Getting her into the car would have been easier had she not been wearing those super high-soled boots. They did work well to keep her up out of the snow, but did nothing for her balance. Sarah had followed the two out to the curb. "I'd best get going. It's coming down hard." The two girls looked at the street with dread and intimidation. "It's a good thing I bought that cough button." "Kind of looks like a sci-fi movie." They stood there watching as the snow piled up. "I think I'd better walk you home." Pam was beginning to worry. "It's only 3 houses." Sarah was far braver than she was thoughtful. "Yes, and I can only see about 50 feet. Pam started walking Sarah right beside her. "This is just plain creepy." Miss Bellum opened the door as the two stopped up onto the porch. "Would you look at that?" She was dressed like a normal middle-aged mother, which was better than her former self as a psychic vampire dressed to look like a teenage girl. Pam said all the things you're supposed to say to neighbors, especially neighbors you know and like, and then she turned to make her way back home. Looking at the sidewalk, Pam saw their tracks had already vanished under the new layer. "This is just plain peculiar." She stomped her feet to get the snow off before entering her house. The street light was just a whitish glow in the distance. Pam looked at the pizza boxes and the drinks that sat everywhere. "I'll clean up tomorrow. Too tired." She drug herself up to her room. Chapter 6. Cold. The room was nice and toasty when Pam rolled out of bed and onto the floor. She got her sock-clad feet and went in search of clothes. The backyard looked like something from the Arctic Circle. The snowman was still visible as a snowy mound with a roughly human shape to it. Bundling up for the worst snowstorm in July in Texas, she braced herself before opening the door. Running across the front walk, she made it to her car and jumped in. The engine didn't want to get going since it was not used to existing in Arctic conditions. When at long last the motor was rumbling in the mechanical kind of way, Pam put it in reverse to back out of the driveway. Nothing much happened except the tires, which spun on the ice. "Looks like I'm not going anywhere fast." She put the car back in park and shut it off. Jumping from the driver's door, she dashed back into the house. "I'll just call in and tell them I'll be late." Pam pulled her cell phone out and then wondered who she would call. No one was in the office yet. Mulling it over, she decided to call the one person that always was ready and willing to lend a hand. "Hello, Cassandra? Yeah, I'm stuck at home. No, the snow piled up behind my car and I can't get out." Cassandra said she'd be by in a minute. Cassandra drove a supersized pickup with four-wheel drive and a bumper-mounted winch. The giant truck came plowing through the snow-filled street as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Pam had to kick a trail through the snow to get to the curb, and then she had to jump up onto the running board so she could get into the jacked up vehicle. She kicked the snow from her boots before climbing inside the nice, warm cab. Cassandra put it in gear, and the pickup pulled away with hardly any notice of the obstacle. Would you believe the streets are clear just a half a mile away? You're kidding. This is just some local anomaly? Yep, it was 80 degrees when I left my house. The healer was driving as if driving through the snow, and July was just another day. Pam had a thought. How many blocks are covered with snow? Cassandra considered the question. Maybe 4 or 5 in each direction? Do you think we could drive around a bit and see? Pam wanted to find out why she was being honored with a summertime blizzard. They drove east until they came to dry pavement. Then they turned around and went back the way they'd come. Within 2 blocks, the snow was deep enough to be a problem. They passed Pam's house and then watched as the snow really got deep. Cassandra threw the transfer case into 4 and gave it the gas. The snow crested at 5 blocks and then began to disappear. It looks like it's a 5-block radius, 10 blocks from east to west. They next tried north and south, finding about the same results. Well, it looks like you're in the middle of it. Well, more like off to one side. Cassandra got them headed back to the office. It was in the low 70s as they jumped from the pickup at the office. Standing at the coffee bar, everyone was talking about discovering Sharma Daruka being a ghost and the snowball fight in Pam's backyard when Mrs. Clark came walking in. Her son Garrett was with her. She looked as if he'd saved the world, which in fact he had. Dr. Mansfield wants to see if Garrett can see through anything else. He's going to try a bunch of different substances to see how he does. She got a huge cup of coffee to keep her mind off throttling the scientists as they argued amongst themselves and forgot what they were here to do. They do have a tendency to lose track of their scientificking. Pam had been called on to break up more than one fistfight lately. The conversation got back to the party investigation from last night. So, are you going to go see your ghost client? Barbara, with no discernible last name, asked. Pam considered this part of her duties. Yeah, I guess I should. She was wondering how she would broach this subject. Grab her giant Americano, she headed out to the storage building to get the company car. I'm driving this overpowered hearse more than my own car. She gently gave it some gas and rocketed out of the driveway. Mrs. Daruka lived, or rather used to live, on the edge of the snowbound region of the town. Pam lived in either a small city or a big town. No one was ever able to decide which it was. Driving along in the supercharged Deathmobile, Pam was glad she'd brought all of her cool and cold weather clothes for a change. Stopping at the curb, Pam rolled the window down to judge how much material was needed for her to at least be comfortable out in it. A jacket it is. She grabbed the jacket with all the extra zippers and pockets and walked to the front door. Knocking at the door, she waited for Miss Daruka to answer. Howdy, ma'am. I have some results about your haunting. Sharma looked left and then right to be sure her neighbors weren't watching. Come on in. I'll have some fresh tea in the kitchen. Pam followed the woman to the only room in the house with heat. How long can you avoid telling someone they're dead? Pam hemmed and hawed. She talked about the weather, which for once was an interesting subject, and then she listened as Sharma talked about the power company. I called them again to see about coming by and fixing my power, and they said they couldn't because it was something to do with the city. Pam was more nervous than any time she had been lost in the old outhouse. Miss Daruka, did you just maybe die recently? Pam brought the teacup up to her mouth to disguise her face. What was that? Sharma looked at Pam as if she had misunderstood the question. Did something happen that may have just possibly made you think you may have been killed? Pam had to fight the urge to jump up and run for the door. Sharma laughed, just enough to show she wasn't about to attack. Then she got quiet. The kind of quiet you see just before everything blows up. What is it you're trying to say? Pam went for broke, just like removing solidified cheese woos from her nose. We looked at the evidence and we found it is you that is haunting this house. You're a ghost. Sharma was more entertained than upset by this declaration. If you're trying to be funny, you should work on your delivery. So did you find something or not? She stared into Pam as if able to see right through her outsides and into her insides. Pam tried a new tact. We looked at all the evidence. I had the entire, most of the ones she could get to come by. The staff, looking at the evidence as well, we all agreed the ghost in your house is you. Pam looked at the floor to see if there was anything of interest down there. Sharma tried smiling. She acted as if Pam was mistaken. There's just no way. She rubbed her arms as if cold. I'm perfectly very much alive. It started as just a sniffle. Then there was something in her eye that caused it to water. Sharma blinked hard to clear her vision. The realization that Pam was right hit like a meteorite coming down on an empty soda can. The tears flowed like water from Niagara. Sharma was overpowered by the realization that she was no longer among the living. Pam was overwhelmed by this woman's grief. Sliding from her chair, she tried to console the bereaved ghost the only way she could think of. She tried to hug her. Her arm went halfway through the spirit's body. Holy cow! Pam was so startled. Sharma was startled as well. It did get her to stop with the waterworks. Oh, that felt bizarre. Pam looked at her hand that was still part way through the other woman. You can feel me? Yes, and it feels creepy, as Sharma looked down at the hand sticking out from her shoulder. Pam sat back quickly and pulled her hand back, folding them in her lap. Talk about violating your personal space. This got them both to laughing. Pam fought the urge to wipe her hand on her dress. After blowing off some steam through laughter and giggles, the two sat there contemplating the issue at hand. So, if I'm dead, then what am I supposed to do next? Sharma gave Pam a look that implied she should have answers since Pam was the ghost expert. I've had very little practice at being a boot. Pam had never encountered a situation even kind of remotely similar to this one. I guess you could go to the light. Oh, and then what? Hang out with a bunch of dead relatives that, to tell the truth, I barely care for when they were alive? Waiting for my next reincarnation? And what if I come back as a cockroach? This led to some sniffles and a lot of eye wiping. I'd rather stay here as a boot. There's that word again. What's a boot? Pam asked. Boot, B-H-O-O-T, boot. It's Hindu for ghost. As Sharma was distracted from her grief while answering the question. Pam thought about the Civil War soldiers that spent their days replaying the last few days of the war between the states and playing chess. A few had gotten into gardening as well. The old cemetery was looking quite nice lately. Sharma continued. I don't want to live or stay here with a bunch of people I don't know and probably won't like. She wiped some fluid from her nose, which was bright red. The nose, not the fluid. The fluid was kind of a clearish, snotty look. No wonder I keep seeing strange people in what used to be my home. I'll have nowhere to go but the street. More of that waterworks. I'll be a homeless ghost, she wailed, which was very eerie coming from a dead woman. You could come stay with me. It was out before Pam could think. She had just invited a ghost to come haunt her home. Maybe she'll pass. Are you sure? You don't really mean that. It would be nice. I've kind of gotten to like you. She reached over and grabbed Pam's hand to hug her to her chest and pulled her partway through her body. Oh, that felt weird. As Sharma looked around the not so attractive kitchen, now that she was dead, or at least she knew she was dead, more like admitted she was dead, the place did look very run down. There was a haunted house look to everything, despite her best efforts to keep it clean. And it did explain why the lights had been turned off. Sharma disappeared. Not vanished as in poof, she was gone, but vanished out at the door and left Pam sitting there all alone. Pam finished her tea and then spent some time looking around the room. Well, that didn't go so bad after all. After too long, Pam went to the bottom of the stairs. I'll be going then. Do you need anything before I leave? And Pam hoped the ghost had forgotten her offer. The house was silent, as any deserted house could be. Pam waited for several minutes, and wondering what had happened to Miss Daruka, and finally she turned for the door. She was halfway out when Sharma came bundling down the stairs with a huge suitcase in each hand. The ghost was out the door and at the curb in record time. Is this your car? She had a "you've got to be kidding me" look on her face. Pam opened the rear compartment and watched as Sharma hefted the two oversized bags into the space. I guess I could drop you off at the house. Pam wondered if the hearse would make it through the snowdrifts. They clomb into the front. Pam got busy driving them to her house. I wonder what my folks will think about this one, she mumbled under her breath. The snow had melted just enough to allow them access to the house. The air felt to be about 50 degrees, and a lot of the streets were filled with water. The ice was making the storm drains work less efficiently than the government. That's our place there, Pam pointed to her house. I guess you could use the guest bedroom for now, till you find some place of your own. She hoped and prayed that the ghost would only stay the night or two. Pam opened the front door and allowed Sharma access to her home. I hope I won't regret this. She hoped that wasn't out loud. Sharma moved into the guest bedroom. She unloaded her cases into the closet and then moved about the room looking at each and every item there, as if finding an unknown treasure or a mess needing dealing with. Pam stood at the door, unsure as to what she should do next. Well, I guess I should be getting back to work. She wondered how she was going to explain this to her folks, or anyone for that matter. And with that, I'm going to call it quits for this episode. I hope you enjoy it. If you didn't enjoy it, then why are you listening? Until next week, this is Chris James for Storytime.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.